7:35 on Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. And this is the meeting of the Sandpoint Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission, and it is now called to order. For the record, I am Chairwoman Ellie Sussness, presiding at the City of Sandpoint Council Chambers. 11:23 meeting in Sandpoint, Idaho. The commission members present are Barry, Rick Decker,
Keely Gray,
Carmen Wiedemeyer,
Woody Sherwood.
and Hannah will be with us shortly. And Mike Lithgow is not with us this morning on Zoom, and Caitlin Shook is not with us in person. All right, we will now proceed to the meeting minutes approval. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 14th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Good boy. A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I abstained because I wasn't at the meeting.
Anyone abstains? Motion passes. So, financial report. So in our SARA funds, we had in the downtown district $144,094.16. In the northern district, we have $78,928.04. We do have some remaining balance in the Silver Box project of $5,159.78. Is there any questions on that? All right, onward then. On to old business, 5A, the NEA ARP subgrant program. Heather, do you have an update?
I do. So on March 1st, all of the semi-annual reports were due, and I'm happy to say that everybody turned them in. So Contracts right now is working on gathering any additional information or fulfilling that end. One thing I do want to mention, the museum did not have a UEI number, and they applied with the federal government. So when they turned in their grant application, it was under the understanding that that UEI is pending. The government has not been very responsive to the museum, so they have not received a contract yet. As soon as they get that UEI number, that's a unique identification identifier number, then they will be able to have the grant agreement, and then they'll be turning in their semi-annual report. So that one's just a little bit delayed. And that's what Hannah's currently working on today. So, but Hannah's done a really good job of updating us with the process that she's been doing to try to achieve that number, all of the contacts and so forth. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it can happen soon for them.
I tried to help her with it a couple weeks ago. It seems like that the museum either existed before and there was some like clerical error, and she was like, oh, you did it so easily. And I'm like, I'm a new entity. You're an older entity. And so I think that's the hiccup.
Yeah.
Since the museum's been around for so long, there's some information, but yeah, I felt for her that day because she's working so hard to try to get that.
Absolutely. I think we've all been there with the federal government. If there is a little hiccup, it's like, oh, trying to get that resolved and get a person online
Is that for the
terrible.
SAM process?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
It's at sam.gov.
Sometimes you just gotta call
Yeah.
and talk.
Yeah.
That's what she's doing today.
Because there is a little glitch in there somewhere that will screw you up, and you'll never get resolved without getting
So
through
painful.
somebody.
Is there any other questions on that report? All right, then we'll move on to 5B, which is the Idaho Gem Grant.
I have really exciting news. We were awarded the Idaho Gem Grant. Yes, so just a little review of that. That was a grant that the city of Sandpoint applied for on behalf of the Canada to have the roof replaced. And that was through the Idaho Commerce, and that specific one is an economic stimulus grant. And so it was for $41,000 to match the Canada's $89,000. So it's going to council tomorrow, and it's on the agenda to accept the grant. So we're not putting it out there right now and contacting press or anything, but we're really, really excited about it. So it's fun to see all of our actions and goals accomplished in our master plan.
Yes, we're ticking them off.
Yay.
Thank you for all the hard work that you put into
Oh,
that. I know
thank
that was a fast, hard.
Yes.
long.
Very
This is a
rewarding
great
though.
example of collaboration, how we can help the different other organizations and then what kind of spreads from there, but
Absolutely.
just our letterhead is huge and stuff like
Yes.
that. right?
And that grant particularly only municipalities can apply for. So like you're saying, if we can find those grants that the nonprofits can't necessarily get, and then do a sub-grant funding like the NEAR or the GEM, those are the opportunities we're looking for, at that high level of support.
It's awesome.
Very good. Any other questions?
Is the city the grant administrator for that one?
So I'm actually the grant administrator.
For the gem grant?
Yes.
I'm so lucky to have you. It's so wonderful.
Well, and I'm always open. I'm an open ear to nonprofits that come to me looking that have a grant opportunity. And what happens is I go through a process of criteria and understanding where we are too in terms of bandwidth with the city and with arts, culture, and historic preservation in terms of the impact and how it aligns currently with our strategic plan and our master plan as well.
And that's a good question, actually. So there was a little bit of a crunch with that. Was that something that came up quickly and then we had to jump on it?
Little history with that one. So, and in September, I was approached by the Canada and they wanted to apply for the grant. I believe it's a quarterly cycle with the GEM grant. And at that point, this grant is a all funds in grant, and they didn't have all of the match funding. So I told them, let's take a pause and let's get ourselves prepared for the next cycle. And December rolled around, and the due date was December 19th. I was like, oh, like, are we doing this? So yeah. And it just worked out that we had a little bit of bandwidth, and we had already talked about this prior months ago. And yeah, but there were a couple late nights on my end making that deadline.
Very good.
Yeah, so that's going to be wonderful once we can share that with everybody.
Awesome. Very good. All right, let's move on to 5C, the cultural collective campaign.
So I'm thrilled to let you all know that tomorrow we have a oral history with Carol Diener, and Hannah and Ellie are going to join me on that one. And through that oral history, we are going to find out a little bit about Carol's background and the impact that she's made through the arts community. And we're also going to get some highlights and missing information about our public art as well. So it will be a wonderful, informative time and our first. And so again, all of that information that we're collecting will be donated to the museum, and it will go in their archives, and we'll be able to use that information here at the city for different projects.
Is that going to be just with you and Carol, or is that a public thing?
It's just internal, and you guys are always welcome to join on those interviews. Sometimes with oral histories, the smaller the better though, because it's kind of an intimate process. What I do with oral histories is I actually use voice memo on my phone and I record it, and the museum has a transcription software. So it transcribes it all, and then someone just looks over it to double check that it's recording the right people. But I think can identify multiple voices in the interview.
That's amazing.
Yes, and we did have, the city had a meeting with Ross Hall not too long ago, and he wanted to share his story about the Bay Trail, that's Ross Hall Jr. And I was able to talk about the Cultural Collective campaign, and he's excited to have an oral history done as well, focusing on the Bay Trail. And so it's wonderful to see how this program is really working well for the community to be heard and for them to be able to share a bit of their life. So I'll let you all know when we get that scheduled.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's just gonna keep growing.
Is there any questions about that? All right, then let's keep moving on. On 5D, another report on the downtown waterfront competition.
Yes. So it's off and running. I think you guys all got my email about when it opened within the first hour, there were 8 teams that already had applied. And it's kind of funny because I'm already seeing with myself and other individuals at the city that design teams are trying to privately contact us looking for information. Yep. So don't be surprised if you guys get an email or something, and obviously it wouldn't make sense if we are downloading to certain teams and not others, because there's appropriate times when we'll be sharing to all of the teams. If you guys have questions on what to say or how to deal with a situation like that, please feel free to contact me and I'll give you that perfect little sentence. But I thought that was really funny.
Because the consensus is everything goes to Don and his team.
There's a process. Absolutely. So going back to that process, on February 21st, the registration opened. March 30th is stage 1. So that's when the submittals are due for the design teams. And so, they're scrambling right now, trying to make theirs really attractive, right? And then this one's a really important one. So the week of, well, let's see. So the week of April 3rd is the stage 1 jury session. And then April 13th is the one that for me is really, or they all are, but that's the on-site briefing of the stage 2 teams. So stage 2 is that next level of designers that come through. And that's the Meet Your Designers event. And I actually don't have a lot of specifics on what that will look like, but what I do know is that I have a 10-minute technical debrief. So it's really an important time. And what I'm doing is I'm debriefing to all of those design teams in stage 2. And so it's really, really high level. But I will have a lot of in-depth information that they can access at that time too. And so that's where they can gather that information from me, and I can field any questions at that point. So that would be the appropriate time when I would have contact with the design teams. Does anybody have any questions on that? I'll certainly be emailing you as I get more information about what that looks like. That is the, it's a public event, so it'd be great if all of you could be there, and I'll make sure you know ahead of time.
That's the one on the 13th.
That's correct.
What time should we put on our calendar?
I don't have that yet. I'm so sorry. And I think it's at the Hive, but I'm not sure. So as soon as I have those details, I'll email you all. It should be an amazing time though.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm really excited about it. So that's the news with the waterfront competition.
Very exciting. Is there any questions on that? All right. Next up then is 5E, the Stephen Lyman Art Show, Rediscover.
Yes, so I have the dates and the times for the art show. So it will be at the U of I Agriculture Center on Boyer. Are you all familiar with that venue? Perfect. And it will be Friday, June 2nd from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. And on the 3rd from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. This is an amazing example of collaboration and building capacity. So again, Stephen Lyman's, the curator of his collection, contacted the city saying they want to bring the show to the city of Sandpoint. They want it to be a community event. I acted as a connector and I contacted POAC, and they have this amazing relationship with the Ag Center. The other caveat was the Lyman collection didn't have any reserve funds for building or anything. So we were able to have the Ag Center of the U of I sponsor the event for free. And so it just worked out beautifully. So again, this will be a free event open to the community. It's going to be in our Parks and Rec summer booklet, which is great. So the timing was right there. And I'll definitely, as the event comes closer, let you all know about different things that are happening. There might be a time when they need some help, maybe setting up some easels or something like that. So if you're interested in being a part of the art show on a higher level, I'm sure they would love the support for that. So very exciting.
So will POAC be doing the PR for that?
They're doing the PR, we're doing the PR. And in any, avenues that you guys have, we would love to get that out to the community.
I was just thinking social media, if there's an event tab or something like that. we can share
Absolutely.
that,
Yes.
As well as telling our friends and everyone.
Perfect. So as soon as that social media starts popping up, I'll make sure that you guys get that so you can share that along.
The Parks and Rec Department, when it comes out in the booklet as well, anytime there's something in the booklet that's a program that we're involved in, we do a monthly promotion about 2 weeks to a month out, and it goes on our Facebook page as well for the city.
How many people does that email?
The rec one has close to 4,000, I think. And then I don't know how many followers we have on Facebook. And then I usually send it out through the city's website, e-notifications as well. So there's like different pools.
So fabulous. And when we think about Parks and Rec, there's culture that's underneath that umbrella too. So make sure to let me know if you guys have any events, and we can certainly promote that through Parks and Rec.
Perfect. All right, any questions? Gonna be a great event. All right, let's move on to 5F, presentation of historic preservation.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. We've got this. Let's see. So I have a little presentation for you all. I appreciate you, everyone, being so patient when it's come to historic preservation, because we talked about it being a large elephant to digest. And I was talking to planning and zoning, and they said it's actually a herd of elephants that we need to. So what I did was I put together a presentation that's pretty high level, and I thought it was important to share this all with you, and I'll also share it with the individuals that are not here today. But it goes into the different aspects of historic preservation. So here we go. I loved this quote. So if things go on as they are, Boise stands an excellent chance of becoming the first American city to have deliberately eradicated itself. So that was a quote by L.G. Davis of Harper's Magazine in 1974, and not Harper's Bazaar, by the way. And I thought that really grabbed me, and it's an example of what was happening back as early as the 60s, where there was urban renewal energy happening, and they were literally taking out all of the historic buildings. And it was a scary time, and you started to see all these grassroots efforts start to develop with historic preservation. And that was where the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 came about. And this is the first Historic Preservation Act, and it's a really important one. And it's a federally funded program, and it's for infrastructure, and it was a way to create a division with the federal government to start creating protection amongst historic places, buildings. So it's part of the US legislation. So I always remember the National Preservation Act of 1966. So that was the first like recognizable federal program. So in terms of what does the National Historic Preservation Act do? It's interesting. So as I'm in different meetings, and sometimes I'm in meetings with the ecological department or planning, everyone seems to know Section 106. And the important thing about Section 106 is a review process. So anytime there's a building project going on and it includes federal funding, SHPO, which we'll get into, gets triggered, and there has to be a cultural study done of that land. So in that it's viewed, what is the historical background of the property? What is the archaeological background of it? And they want to make sure that if they're building a road through a site, it doesn't have any cultural negative impacts to it. There's also Section 110, which is the code of different responsibilities for historic preservation amongst the federal agencies. Hello. And then the other big thing that the National Historic Preservation Act did was it created the National Registry of Historic Places. So that's the national inventory. And when we talk about our national registry, our downtown district, that is part of that National Registry of Historic Places. They also became the authority for grant programs for historic preservation, and they have an advisory council too. So it acts as an independent federal agency that they actually advise the president and Congress on historic preservation matters. And so what that does, so we just did an overview of the federal branch of historic preservation. So now we're going a little bit farther in and we're talking about our state. So we have the Idaho State Historic Society. And this was actually, interestingly enough, I'm a little bit of a history junkie. So I wanted to let y'all know it was founded by Idaho pioneers in 1881. And that was 9 years before we were a statehood, which was 1890. And it was established as a state agency in 1907. So it has 7 members in their board of trustees that's appointed by the governor to represent Idaho's 7 judicial districts. And what does the Historical Society do? They have a historical museum, and it's the official state museum. And they have their own set of archives, which the public has access to. And they have the State Historic Preservation Office, and that maintains records of historic places and archaeological sites. And they also have a historic sites program too. So they do their own programming. I think of it very much like the historic society that we have here with the Bonner County Historical Society and all the different aspects. So it's interesting to know that we have a state entity that does that as well. And then we have the State Historic Preservation Office. So that's who essentially maintains that's who works under the Historical Society of the state. And this is SHPO. So I talk about SHPO all the time. That's SHPO. There's no I involved in that. And this is who we as a commission work closely with. And I talk about Dan Everhart. He's the director of SHPO. And you all will have an opportunity to meet Dan, which will be wonderful. And their job, and these are all experts too. So everybody that works for SHPO has to have all of those wonderful accolades that, remember how I talked about our commission and how we have the 5 different standards for the Department of Interior for historic preservation. They do as well. And they conduct surveys. They recognize historic properties. So they are all the nomination for the National Registry of eligible properties goes through them. They prepare and implement historic preservation plan. I thought that this was really interesting because so SHPO themselves for the state of Idaho, they have a 6-year strategic plan, which was really great. They provide support through grant funding. So the 2 grants that we work with SHPO on would be the CLG grant, which is the Certified Local Government Grant. And we'll talk a little bit more about CLGs. And it's the CEG, which is the Community Enhancement Grant. They support CLGs. So what that means is they advise and assist certified local governments in carrying out historic preservation. So when I sat down with Ellie and we had a meeting with Dan via Zoom, it's Dan's job to make sure that we understand all the nuts and bolts, and he helps us prepare our preservation plan as well and guides us through that process. They just hired a new employee at SHPO, Maria, and she's in charge of the CLG program. So she oversees just the CLGs, which is great. And again, they educate, train, and advise. Huge asset. So in the summertime, Dan and Maria are talking about coming down and meeting all of you, answering questions, but they could also do a community event of education as well. So as they start planning their schedules on their visitation, as soon as like the world starts thawing out, and we find out when they're coming down, it'd be good to start creating that synergy of how can we utilize their time in helping educate our public about historic preservation. So what is a certified local government? So CLGs are communities that have shown commitment of historic preservation by adopting a local ordinance and creating a historic preservation commission. We are a CLG. So the advantages, why would we want to be? So that gives us a really tight working relationship with SHPO. They provide technical assistance for historic preservation programs, support through grant funding, and other major funding sources too that are out there for historic preservation. Okay, so that's federal government, that's state, and that's local. So boom, boom, boom. Those are the branches of that tree, right? So now let's talk about support. So this is more of your nonprofit world. And here we have, and I'm sorry about this little screen here, but we have Preservation Idaho. So Steve Garvin, he's talked a lot about Preservation Idaho. He's on the board of that. Preservation Idaho was started in 1972. It was a grassroots effort for historic preservation to help save the remainder of the downtown core. And this is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's led by volunteers who are dedicated for the protection of Idaho and Boise's heritage. Their mission is to preserve the places that make Idaho unique through education and advocacy. So when we think of Preservation Idaho, what we want to remember is orchids and onions. I know a lot of you have heard me talk about that. In 1977, they created this amazing award ceremony, and it was designed to celebrate individuals and organizations that have made a positive contribution to historic preservation. So it's a way to really bring awareness and show projects that are insensitive and very sensitive to the state's cultural history. We have, as a city, been very active with nominations of orchids and onions. The first one was the Canada in 1985. So we have a lot of orchids in our community. The last one was Macduff's, and they've been doing this for 45 years. And I believe, we've been kind of right along with them. We've had one onion, and that was the first church, which Church Street was named after. And it was the historic residence that was where Joel's restaurant was. And that was a complete scrape there. And then they built Joel's Mexican restaurant. Yeah, it was a little heartbreak moment. Gail Lister went in through the rubble and collected samples of the wallpaper that was on that historic building and made a collage, and it's in Joel's. So that's what we have left of that.
When was that?
Gosh, I think it was probably only in the 90s.
It must have been the late
late
90s,
90s.
early 2000s.
Yeah. And it happened overnight.
Really?
Like literally, I remember it happened before I was on the commission, which I was on the commission for 6 years, 2 years prior. And we still talk about that as like the moment. The other, so again, the orchids and onions, that's not a, hey, it's a protection vehicle. It's simply a advocacy, education, and an honorary concept, okay? So it's something we all need to remember. We have another honorary moment, the National Registry. We talked about that. That's managed through the federal and the state. So these are different historic districts and individually registered places. And I'll go into what we have here in the Sandpoint. But one thing that I think people don't understand, the National Registry does not protect buildings. It just honors them. So this has no teeth in terms of protection. But what are the benefits of having a National Registry district? Of course, we are CLGs. It's revitalization, economic development, it's preservation of community character, and it's a heritage tourism attraction as well. Okay, so why do we have historic preservation and what are the benefits? And this is something that our historic preservation team will elaborate on, but this is just a high level nugget of the why. So environment is a huge thing. Historic buildings have intrinsic value. They were built with old growth timber, which a hurricane would be hard to take down. The windows, the character, the craftsmanship, you just can't find that anymore. People can't afford that. The brick firewalls, it's amazing to look at how a building was built during the 1900s, even if it was a quick build, so different than today. And it also keeps materials out of the landfills. And there's some really great numbers of that. And I think it's very great and wonderful for us to understand what are those actual numbers and percentage rates. And these are all things that we really need to soak in and understand so we can talk to people about it. Culture and education. Historic preservation is a reminder of the city's culture and complexity. It's the genealogy, it's our community's ancestral history. And then economy. New businesses, local makers prefer older buildings. Walmart's not going to come into a downtown and want to be in a historic building, right? But that local maker that's so unique and special, that's very attractive to them. And then it also attracts tourists too. And this is my own little thing, but once it's lost forever. You can't, necessarily just redo a historic building. You can't recreate the soul of a building and the history. This is very high level, but I think it's really important for you all to understand. So these are 2 tax benefits that any business can have for renovations. And I'll definitely send this to you all so you have it. And this is specific to ADA improvement and renovation as well. So we have a general tax credit, and then there's an IRS tax deduction. Whenever it comes to tax deduction, I always make people aware of it, but I suggest that they go to their tax accountant for details about how it can intimately affect them and their rehabilitation. But the one really unique tax credit that applies only to historic properties would be the rehabilitation tax credit. And it's also referred to as the Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program. And essentially it's a credit for 20% of the expenses for a substantial rehabilitation of a historic building that is income generating. So that's the big caveat there. And this is according to the US National Park Service. There's also another interesting thing about having a local historic ordinance and registry. There's a building code that exists in Idaho that's connected to the 2018 Idaho Existing Building Code of Chapter 12. And what this does is it allows you to have exceptions in code. And that could be like you wouldn't have to change a historic stairway railing, guard openings. If you have these beautiful old doors and they swing a different way, you could keep them. It has to do with fire resistance. Woody, would you speak to your personal moment on that one?
Yeah, I certainly would be happy to. So I'm in the process of rehabilitating a 1912 home that was built by John Selly. And upstairs, there was a gang of 4 windows in a room that we were making a bedroom out of. And the width on these windows are approximately 21 inches. And the height of the operable part was like 30 inches. So they were a few inches short, both in width and height in terms of being a egress, certified egress window. And we submitted our plans to the city, and, you know, we all going at it and stuff. And we get to the end, and the city had hired a new building inspector, and came in and he said, well, I really like everything you've done here. It's really beautiful and stuff, but what about the egress windows here? And I said, oh, that was never on the agenda. You know, it was never brought up, it was never anything. So he said, well, I'm not empowered to make this decision here or anything. So he said, but you need to get in touch with Christine. So in due course, about 10 days later, I got in touch with Christine, and she said, well, I looked at it, I researched it, and we can make an exception with the 2018 existing building code because of the hardship that would be involved in trying to change this window, because it would result in a significant redesign of the building. Plus, it was at that point in time, it should have been brought up at the beginning of the project if it was something that they wanted rather than at the end. But the cool thing about the whole thing is that we were able to get through this gate utilizing this exception in the building code here, and it really worked out well. You know, and she said the only thing you have to keep in mind is that the overall height of your window might get destroyed in the event of a fire, because the firemen to come in, utilize that window for access. It's not just egress, it's also firemen getting in to check and see if there's anybody in there. They needed like 30 inches of height to get the firemen and the breathing apparatus through the hole. So I said, well, just tell them to use the biggest axe they have, make sure they just get it out of there and get in there and figure out what it takes. We can fix the window, you know, but you can't fix the human life. So, you know, and so anyway, it was kind of and this just happened in the last 60 days, 90 days that this all came about and stuff. So anyway, it's kind of a
Intimate account of
anecdotal story of how this is going to work and what it means to the preservation of some of the aspects of our town and community.
And the great news is our team here at the city does have a depth of knowledge about historic preservation, and they're very creative and they're very passionate too. And so we all will work together to try to figure out ways that benefit the homeowner, but also align, you know, with what needs to be done. Christine's amazing, and sometime I'm going to have her come in and talk to you also. You can meet her. But her biggest thing is making sure people are safe. That's number one. But then number two, it's like, how can we keep historic preservation vibrant? You know, so what's that balance? Is your house the 412 South 2nd Avenue?
No, it's,
Oh,
it's 207 South 4th.
okay, so it's another Sully house.
Yeah. And we didn't even realize it was a Sully house until the women stopped by one day this past fall, and said, well, my grandparents owned this, and you know, and they went through the whole thing. And my wife was able to track it down. Apparently, the original title was given to John Selly. We do not know for sure whether he built it or not, or if he just owned the, but he had the original title on the property.
And I call that a history mystery, and we always need to be kind of going down those rabbit holes trying to figure that out when time allows. That is so wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Woody. So that's the nuts and bolts of historic preservation. I'm going to have one more historic preservation presentation for you before we end today. Is there any questions about that?
I just want to thank you for putting that together.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Because that boils it down to really great information, things that we hear bandied about, but maybe don't quite understand exactly what it is now that now we have a really good idea.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Awesome. Any other questions?
I kind of have one.
Yeah.
Along these lines. So I'm fascinated with like ranking our buildings downtown, you know, because we have code that, and then there's the actual registry that things get on, and then you can't touch them as much, you know, but
Right.
as far as like a property owner just wanting to keep the historic value of the place. And if we could rank the buildings downtown, you know, a 10 is like
Yeah.
our best building or whatever.
Right.
And then a 1 is like, if you took that down, that'd be kind of okay, you know, and put up something a little along these lines. Has the city ever thought about a ranking system?
Well, you're gonna love to hear what the historic preservation team is going to do. So thank you for bringing that up. Can we talk a little bit more about that during 6B?
Definitely.
Perfect.
Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
All right. Well, we're heading on to new business, 6A. So we need to elect a vice chair. Vice chair would take over the meetings, running the meetings when I'm not here. And I wondered if there was any discussion.
What are are there any prerequisites to like what you have to be in order to be vice chair?
Well, I think we talked about the fact that I represent more the arts, just because I came from the art commission. We thought it would balance it a little bit if we had more of a historical background as the vice chair.
We don't necessarily, historically, we've never had a formal process. It's kind of like an open, like if people can, if they have an interest, they can speak to it.
I just know
Or
some
someone
ones
can be
have to
nominated.
like, on the, certain
No.
rules where you can be elected.
No, we don't have any guidelines for that. So
Great question, though.
Can I make a nomination?
sure.
If she would serve, I'd like to nominate Hannah.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, so Hannah's been nominated as vice chair.
Yay.
A lot has happened since you left.
So I would like to entertain a motion to nominate or to vote in Hannah as vice chair. May I have that motion?
So made.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Okay.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. Congratulations.
Yay.
Lucky son of a gun.
Uh-oh.
When you were absent earlier, I was like, well, if you're absent.
Yeah.
Automatically become vice
Yeah,
chair.
that was so easy.
All right, well, thank you so much, Hannah. All right, heading on to 6B, the historic preservation team.
Are you guys ready for another presentation?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. I organize myself now through presentations. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Here we go again. And okay, so here's a presentation about historic preservation in our community. I'm not going to go in the depth of this, but essentially, if you want to think about stylistic booms, there were three big ones. So you have the turn of the century where we have railroad and then the timber, storytelling moments. So you have a lot of these homes, businesses that are built in a sporadic boom around the 1900s. And then you had a significant growth period in the community, which reflects in our historic vernacular around the 1940s after Farragut. So you have to remember there were over 45,000 soldiers that came to Farragut, and a lot of them ended up living here and building their life here with their families. There was also a boom in the 1970s. So thank you to the oddly shaped shed roof, the irregular windows. So when I'm thinking and I'm looking at historic properties, commercial and residential, it's kind of fun. There's definitely infill that represents other periods of time, but there is significant amount of buildings that represent those three areas stylistically. So today, how are we preserving our history here in Sandpoint? So we have one district that's on the National Registry. We have 8 individually registered properties. And then we talked about many of our buildings have been awarded orchids and one onion through Preservation of Idaho. We have our Historic Preservation Commission. And the commission has done amazing work historically. It's amazing to think. They've performed many surveys and they've created this beautiful walking tour that is well recognized throughout the community and with tourists alike. And then we've done, I think, a really wonderful job partnering with the museum on many projects to make sure that our history is protected and our advocacy, education, and outreach is really strong. I just put a little highlight here. These are the individual places that are on the National Registry right here. And sometimes we can go into the process of what that looks like, but it's a very, very in-depth process. And again, it's just an honorary process. But we have I always like to call it like what it used to be, which is like the federal building, but now it's Macduff's, the Amanda Nesbitt, the Mary Olson house here. Then we have the Amanda Nesbitt here. That's her original boarding house, and it's one of our very few Victorian examples. The railroad, Northern Pacific Railway Depot. This is the old co-op greenery building, and the original Sandpoint High School, which is the Sandpoint Event Center, our community hall, and the Bigelow building. And then we also, again, have the historic district, which was originally established in 1984, and then there was a boundary expansion in 2018. And the boundary expansion mainly was this area here around Cedar. And the historic preservation team has been working closely, and we'll get into that, but we have a reconnaissance study that was done in 2015 that resurveyed and understood a big portion of the downtown area, which is commercial zone A. I think only over 98 buildings were surveyed. And from that survey and that study, they were able to do the expansion. So they resubmitted an extended boundary for that. In terms of other surveys that have been done, so I just talked about number 6 here, the 2015 Downtown Sandpoint Reconnaissance Survey. We have the Peterson's edition here, 2014, so this is residential. We have number 4 up here, which was the 2013 Farman's edition, again, a residential survey. Number 3 is the 2012 West End Reconnaissance Survey, residential. 2 would be the 2011 Wheels 3rd edition Reconnaissance Survey. And then in 2010, our first survey that we did as a commission was the historic homes of North Boyer and North 6 reconnaissance survey. That one's kind of interesting. I was trying to wrap my mind around the why behind that. And I talked to the individual who did the survey, and she mentioned that there was a little bit of development going on there. So they were trying to capture and understand the history more as development was happening. So after, and I'm sorry I don't have the date on this, but there was a terrible fire that happened in our community, and I think we all can speak to that. We were all here, and that was the Abbott block, right there on Bridge and First. And after that happened, there was a community advisory committee that was put together. And Rick, that was where you and I first connected.
Was, yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. And there was a variety of different historians, contractors, architects, designers, the list goes on. It was a really great group of individuals with a variety of backgrounds. And we sat down and we said, what's our need for historic preservation? And more importantly, design standards, if we had them in our community. And again, all this information from this meeting has been downloaded to the design competition. So they have access to this. And I'm just pointing out, these were the key things that came out of that meeting. And I'm so sorry about my screen here. Can I move that thing? Does that go? Nope. Okay. Nope. Okay. So we talked about color restrictions and painting over original materials. There's restrictions on the covering of historic original materials with different materials should always be considered or required to be done in a way that preserves the underlying original material. Incentives were brought up for tearing off facades to expose original material. A 60-foot height concern was addressed. Concerns were also expressed about economics of a short mixed use building and how that would work. Consideration about limiting by stories as opposed to height. They also talked about how height can impact view sheds. Wayfinding was discussed. Historic signs and roads should be incorporated through separate efforts, i.e. a wayfinding program should be addressed. Residential areas should also be considered in the future for neighborhood districts and overlay zones. And there should be incentives for maintenance and cleaning. So here is a map of what we currently have as our National Registry District. And this is a suggested boundary for a potential historic overlay district as identified by the Community Advisory Committee. It's pretty big, but it's like, where do you stop, right? The state of Idaho only permits one way of preserving legally, and that is through a historic district that's managed by a municipality through an ordinance change attached to design guidelines. So you can't just have one building over here and one building over here. So that is the challenge for most all communities, is how do you have that one district that protects all those buildings, but have it not be too large, because managing a giant district is a huge undertaking. And those are the questions that the Downtown Waterfront Design Competition will be answering for us. And so here is the Downtown Waterfront Design Competition bubble. So this is what the design teams have to address with all of the different indicated scenarios that we had talked about previous. And our biggest thing was consider strategies for the protection of the downtown history and character of Sandpoint downtown. So that's embedded in the design competition. So that's a huge one we need to understand. The other thing I thought would be really good for y'all to know, what are our current commercial zones? We have A, B, and C. The one that I think we really need to be aware of and understand intimately would be commercial zone A. And that's the city's downtown. And what's amazing is in the code, it specifically says, this is right out of code, the city's downtown is designated as a commercial A, is so important and significant to the city that it justifies a special set of regulations designed to protect and enhance its character in light of new development. So that's like, boom, right there in our code. We also have commercial zone B, and so it talks about infill development adjacent to existing neighborhoods. Commercial zone C, so it represents a lower intensity commercial area serving adjacent neighborhoods, residents preserving the scale of the built environment by restricting height. Principles that apply to all three of these, and again, this is all in current zone. So effective use of land and services. Sorry, I've got to, there we go. A mix of land uses which strengthen opportunities for economic vitality and support pedestrian activity as well as housing opportunities. C, provide for community gathering places and pedestrian visitor amenities. D, establish a distinct storefront character associated with downtown core area. E, provide transitions to adjacent neighborhoods and commercial areas. F, maintain and enhance the area's character through design guidelines. G, encourage residential development above ground floor. And H, encourage structured parking in commercial areas. So that's our code. The one design area, which is Title IX, so that talks about design standards for commercial A zone, is here. And I can send that all out to you. I know you guys all are working individuals and have busy lives, so I'm trying to keep this meeting condensed. But essentially, it talks about building size, bulk, scale, and mass, storefront designs. Buildings should have consistent spacing of similar shaped windows, trim, decorative molding. Large display windows should be employed on ground floor storefronts. We have buildings with a flat roof should have decorative cornices at the top of the building. Cornices or changes in material can be used to differentiate the ground floor buildings that have commercial use from upper floor. It goes into detail about that. Facades greater than 50 feet in length shall incorporate recesses and projections. So it talks about ingress and egress. This one's a big one. Building material, the exterior finished material of all facades should be limited to, sorry, stone, brick, and or finished wood. Materials other than those listed are a deviation which may be authorized by the planning director. And then we have other details of that which go into the different building materials. So in circumstances where other materials are proposed, such as stucco, characteristics such as scale and proportion, form, architectural detailing, height, color, and texture shall be utilized to ensure that the proposed material is compatible with surrounding buildings and the character of the commercial area. Building materials shall not create glare. Highly reflective materials shall not be permitted. 3, clear glass windows shall be used for commercial storefront display windows and doors. Ground floor windows shall be defined as glass, and then it goes into more detail. Architectural treatment similar to that provided to the front facade shall be provided to the sides and rear of building to mitigate any negative view from any location off-site in any public area. Exposed, unfinished concrete, non-architectural concrete block or monotonous walls of concrete or corrugated metal shall not be permitted as finished material. Okay, and let's see here. Sorry, there we go. And then the last one addresses civic space, and this is a big one. So civic space serves as informal gathering places for socializing, resting, and enjoyment of an area, contributing to the walkable environment. So essentially, through building permit process, the developer needs to address civic space, and they can choose 2 of the 4 options here. And one of them is public art, and that, according to code, and this will be updated as well because it's no longer just Sandpoint's Arts Commission, it's our commission, but public art as approved by the Sandpoint Arts Commission. So any public art that's proposed on a development for a civic space option has to go through us and we have to approve it. And we'll have a couple that will be coming to us. And so I'll help guide us through what that process looks like.
Are civic spaces, is this a consideration that's required with any development project, or is this separate from like the building, like a building project?
This is required.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of times it's not super obvious because it's like a courtyard and then there's a bench. Or there's a canopy and awning. So if someone wanted to sit out, you know, and wait for a bus, there's a bench and then a little awning. But this has to do with there's a residential development happening and they have to have civic space, and they're actually excited to do a bench and a piece of public art. So you'll see that coming down. And we're working on policies and procedures right now, so that there will be an aspect of procedure on how that works, you know, through our commission. But I thought that was really interesting. It's actually fun to kind of get into code and understand, and at times it helps explain the why, or you see things that you never would have realized. And then other times it's confusing. So that's historic preservation. And what our design, I'm going to stop sharing. Well, actually I have some other, what our historic preservation commission team has been getting together, and we've decided to keep the momentum up. We're going to meet every Monday at 9 o'clock. And some of us may not be able to make it, some may. But what we did was we wanted to do a deep understanding of what our historical assets are here in the community. And Rick, we didn't do a tiered system, which I think, I know. But when you talk about a tiered system, which, and I tried to Google it quickly, but it didn't come up, so I can send it in an email. What you would be going by is the standards of the National Registry. Like, so you'd have to pass those standards, and those go directly back to the Department of Interior secretaries. Let me see if I can say it. It's a mouthful, Lydia and very well, and Karen will have to help me with this. It's the standards that they established and set out. And so what's great is that's a codified set that, so it's like, is the building over 50 years old? Number one, because everyone's asking me about the bridge. And can that be designated as a historic building? And no, it has to be but the museum could, right? So it's over 50 years old.
Yeah. Few years.
Yeah, 1978. So that's one thing to consider. And then like, what is the historic story behind it, essentially? And I'm just going really big picture, there's more here, but then you have like, has the building been created by like an architectural master? Like, is it a great example? So there's a pretty big set of standards that you have to pass, not from the interior, but the exterior, to qualify to be on the National Registry. So when they do a survey, that's what they're doing. They're looking at all the historic vernacular and they're saying how much altercation has been done to this building. You know, what's the original character? And so you go by those, and it's really great because we do have guidelines. And so it wouldn't be the hardest thing to tier it. And a lot of our buildings have been tiered already because they have been surveyed, and that particularly when we're talking about commercial A, that 2015 reconnaissance, that captures that commercial A district, which most of our historic inventory is done. So our team did a understanding session here at the city, and then we did a fun little driving tour. And we stared and we looked and we had this really great open conversation. And through that, we really prepared ourselves, and they supported me in being able to do that technical download on April 13th to let them know what those assets are. And so those teams can create what that ordinance should look like, what that district should look like, because that is their job. Those are the historians, those are the designers, those are the master planners. And through that, they're going to give us the plan and the framework of what we're going to help support. One thing that we thought was interesting, Rick, you could probably speak to this. We were staring at your building. Well, I was saying like, oh, that's where Rick lives.
We're right next to it.
We almost knocked on your door.
I think that one of them. Yeah, it's still
Yeah, so this is an example of a new build that's in Sandpoint, but it has kind of a historic feel to it. It's using brick.
Is that before they put the addition on?
So here's the original, right?
Mhm.
And then here's where Rick lives. You have great history.
It is.
Do you feel their souls?
Yeah.
So, and the great thing about this is my son's great grandfather.
That's
Oh,
so
right
cool.
here.
I know.
So he's still
So
in there.
Yeah, the bootery next door.
That is so amazing.
So is part of that facade original or was that completely redone?
That's a great question. I'd have to look at the records. Isn't it interesting though?
Yeah, they did a really great job recreating it.
And then we also talked about this one being, so one of our biggest things was like infill, you know, what are some great examples and what aren't? And I think we all know some of the examples that don't make sense. We could talk about that for a while, but this is a newer build. And I thought we talked about how cute, this is a separate building. This is Chris Contour's architecture studio here, but I loved like the cute little like side business here, which you can, is very indicative of that turn of the century. And then the back, it's kind of hiding that back. So really when we're looking at these buildings, it's front facing that we're most concerned about. And then the back is pretty modern if you go down the alleyway. So I just pointed those out. But team, please add anything, you know, that you want to this conversation. We also met yesterday. Excuse me, I got to find that document. And I put together a little chart with all of our historic preservation goals. And we came up, I think, with a good, I'm so sorry about this. It's so small, but a good game plan. So 4.2 is update ordinance for design competition. That's already on its way, right? That's what the design competition is doing. I'm doing my technical download. You guys, you're supporting me as one, we're giving them information and understanding and they're going to help us accomplish our goals. The other things that could be accomplished through that design competition that are in our master plan are updating Sandpoint's brand identity, preparing a community placemaking plan, and implementing a historic marker program. The thing that our team will be working on next will be exploring the past residential surveys that have been done. And through analyzing those, we're going to achieve action 4.1, which is understand what individual properties could be on the National Registry. 4.6, explore potential multiple property National Registry nominations, also any Crossman dwellings that could be nominated. And 4.8, which would be reevaluate status of properties that were previously surveyed, because surveys become outdated. And then what happens is maybe something didn't become eligible because it wasn't 50 years old and now it is. Action 5.7 would be another kind of next step, which would be enhance and augment local historic preservation, education, and advocacy. This is something we always need to be doing. So I'm going to make sure you guys know how to talk to it. I'm here to support you in that regard, especially if any ordinance changes are coming down the pike. We need to be able to have those education moments. Maybe we're teaming up with the museum and doing a big campaign, but we want people to understand the why we do historic preservation and how it can positively impact them as well. So we'll start creating that messaging and making sure we all understand that in depth. The next thing would be prepare a historic property design manual, which was 4.3. So from the residential surveys, then we have an understanding of what those significant styles are and creating design manuals. And this is a tool that the museum can use as well when someone wants to learn more about their residential home. We can give them that design manual. And what that does is it inspires them to do a rehabilitation and save the history of that home. So with residential, it's a lot more advocacy and education. 4.7, use digital technology to make information more accessible. I'm currently working with the City of Sandpoint's GIS individual, and they're going to be working with SHPO to get all of those historic surveys that have been done. And then we'll be able to create these really great ArcGIS programs where people can, click on something and it can highlight things. So I'm really excited about that. So we really need to use that digital world to enhance our education. Action 4.4, consider a neighborhood conservation district. Okay, so we've identified designs, we've done our surveys, we've got our digital technologies. Now we need to talk to those individuals that own those homes and say, hey, what do you think about a residential neighborhood? Because that's individually community driven. So after we've gotten people pumped up about historic preservation, that's where the community works with us to create conservation programs. And then after that, action 2.3, historic preservation rehabilitation competition. This was brought up in our meeting. I think it's great, Woody. I think you mentioned that you've been a part of different communities that have created competitions of rehabilitation. And I love that.
Well, I was actually got this idea from a place that I was looking at a rehabilitation happening in Asheville, North Carolina. And they gave an award to these people, but I thought if we could look at that, we could get the B involved in it and stuff, and have a little competition. Maybe we could get people, we could use that as a vehicle to create some interest in the community in terms of what is the kind of overachieving goals of where we want to go, and how do we get people warmed up to getting to that goal.
Let's make it fun. I love it.
Exactly.
So this could be competition. This is also recognition, and this aligns with action 2.3, but it also aligns with 5.4, which is a historic preservation recognition leadership award program. Maybe it's an Orchins and Onions program that we do locally.
Exactly.
And Orchins and Onions actually recognizes individual preservationists too, not just buildings. So I thought that was brilliant. And then the last thing, survey the traditional neighborhood blocks of southwest of downtown, action 4.5. And what's great about our master plan is it's already done a lot of our homework. It's already said, hey, this building should be on the National Registry and Individual Register. This block still needs to be done. This is a high priority. Because our master plan was made up of people that are historic preservation experts too. But for me, and from what our team was saying, that's recognition based. Let's focus on trying to do that ordinance, right? And get some teeth into our preservation protection. Let's focus on education and advocacy, but then we can still continue the surveying work. Surveying, it's a lot of time is involved, and it's costly too. So we'd have to be going through grant process, and it's really important, and we're all going to continue to be doing that. But in terms of like our priorities, we kind of set that where that is. So this is just, I haven't attached dates to this, but it gives you a good idea of kind of where we are with things and how they can align and how they can trigger other things. And I mean, this was like a 5 to 10 year plan. So this is every single action out of our master plan too. But I thought it felt good to kind of have it right up there. So does the team have anything to add, and any other questions to the floor?
I just really enjoyed the interaction with the team members, especially out on, when we took our drive-by. That was, having been here for so long and seeing those buildings with fresh eyes and different input was very interesting, and I think a lot deeper about a lot of things. So that was very good. So that's something that I'm excited about and want to, spread out to the community, just like what he said. It, once you get into it and start feeling the history and getting knowledge about it, it really does get exciting, I feel like.
I've always said this. I think history touches everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody can connect to it, right? In some way. And I thought it was kind of like a therapy moment too. Like it's cathartic to be able to talk and share and get excited about history with other people.
Yeah.
And I did figure out how to calm down the heat in the back of the seats. we had burning rears. It was like, it was on, it was like -5 out that day too. We were roasting.
It was great fun though, and I'm excited to impart the knowledge that we're gaining to the broader community. So thank you for that team, the historical preservation team. I had some updates on the other teams. So the grant calendar team, myself, Hannah, and Keely have not met yet. We've all had a couple really busy weeks, so I didn't want to overload everybody's, but we need to get going on that next week probably. So before we leave here, let's make a date. The public art team, which is Barry, Caitlin, and I. Of course, the weather will start turning, and hopefully we will get out and get some pictures. Although I
It's fabulous.
delved into my collection of my public art pictures over the years, and I think I sent you like 30.
It was
30
amazing.
pictures.
So it's done.
So we have a lot. So
And then Carol will help with that
and
too.
then we have the meeting with Carol tomorrow, who will hopefully fill in some of the gaps of information on our public art inventory list. So,
And Ellie's photos are going also into a master photo archive on our S drive. So every city staff individual has access to use that in presentations, master plans for the website. And then they'll just say courtesy of Ellie Sesnes. So if any of you guys have photos that you want to share with me that are of the community at large, if they have children in it, it has to be the back of their heads, but I would love that. So please share those, and that really helps support us. So I'm trying to help support everybody else with having a great photo archive.
so yeah, we'll get together maybe in a week or so after the rain stops.
And a lot of those are like ongoing projects.
Yeah. Definitely. All right. So if there's no other questions on the team, let's hop up to 6C, which is Parks and Recreation Summer Booklet.
I'm so sorry you guys are hearing so much of me today. And Cami can help support me on this. So the summer Parks and Recreation booklet is coming out. And Cami is going to bless us with her amazing artwork once again. And every year she paints this amazing floral watercolor. And so you'll be seeing the reveal soon of, oh my gosh, she's amazing. Very talented. So that's going to be coming out, and all of you, if you guys, please send me information about your organization, because you can be in the booklet. And we try to put as much as we can, but we're limited to space. And this goes out in the Daily Bee. It's kind of a big deal. It's a really wonderful way to communicate to the community. And so you can send me like a little information about your organization and maybe your mainstay event. Sometimes, for instance, the museum's in there and it talks about First Free Saturdays. But there will always be like a link, to your organization. So it will say, visit www. and then your website for more information. And then it can link to all the different events through your website. So please get me that information within the next week or so I can get that to Cami, and you're feverishly putting together that booklet. So one of the things that our commission needs to decide today, historically, the Historic Preservation Commission, history, did a walking tour, and it's in alignment with our brochure that we put out. And we usually do it during kind of the springtime and summertime with, the weather perking back up. And what I would like to do today is establish when we want to do it and who would like to do it. Historically, sorry, I need to use a new word for that, but there isn't one. It's been preservationists, which is great, but we have some amazing theater people on our team. And who gives an amazing tour like a theater person? Like,
all dressed up, maybe in turn of the century outfit. I have that, by the way. So I love giving tours, and I have like the Madonna headsets that we're ready. So I mean, I can give a tour, but I want you guys to help me give tours too. So first of all, who wants to participate in tours with our commission?
I would gladly get some of my amazing folks to help do
Okay,
that. We have some
perfect.
enigmatic individuals.
I
who would
love
love
that. Okay, so we can train them. And it seems daunting, but it really isn't. So the way that I train people with tours and back in my retail days is you can be an expert, but not know much, okay? So you need to know 3 things about the one topic, and that's it, right? So what are the 3 highlights of each building? And then wow them. And then when they ask an in-depth question, you go, that's such a great question. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. So don't feel intimidated about it.
We'll just have you on speed now. Heather, what's the answer to this?
Yeah, and then I'll have my past historians also supporting me with that too. Okay, great. So anybody else? Really quiet. Okay, perfect. So now, what are we thinking with tours? Do we want to do, how many do we want to do? Once a month?
Is there a time frame that you're thinking of? Like as far as time of year?
I think that what we did them in the last, like mostly around the tourist
That's kinda what I
time.
was wondering,
Yeah,
Because warmer weather
indeed.
would be better. Like
Yeah.
spring and summer.
What I did notice though is a lot of locals showed up, and then you get like 1 or 2 tourists, which is really neat too.
Well, Steve Garvin, when we did Sandpoint my year,
Yes.
Steve led the tour of our day of history
Mhm.
that started at Canada and walked around downtown, and we were all wishing that Steve had a megaphone like you were talking about. But it was, as a person born and raised here, the stuff that I learned that day blew my mind. So yeah, I think a lot of locals would be super stoked to be a part of it.
And this is part of our education advocacy. This is a huge important vehicle for people, you know, knowing about it. So I think what we need to do is decide a standing time when we want to give a tour. And then we need to, as we're ramping up and things are changing, maybe with with the downtown waterfront competition, maybe we do pop-up ones. So Keely, would it be, do you guys have an opinion on when, or should Keely and I just decide what makes sense for tours for the booklet? I'll certainly know, I mean, I have to get this down before April 1st. Do you guys have a strong opinion about dates? No, nothing? Okay. So I think Keely and I will just group on this. And then maybe even we can, and let's have Caitlin do it too, our local celebrity. She's not here. I'm sure she would love to.
Well, actually, I'd love to poke this one. In
Yes.
regards to if we wanted to make it theatrical with your help for costuming. Well, I just mean for reference. If we could steal your eyes on stuff. Thank you.
Or even if it's just like a hat or something, you know, which I have.
I would just want to be like, Hannah, is this appropriate? And then you can be like, get rid of the shoes.
Yeah, I used to be
I'm not sure about that yet.
no, definitely a clothing dealer, and some of like the pieces I haven't been ever able to not have in my life. So it'd be great to see those go to use. And does the museum still have a collection that could be like rented out? That's not part of the collection. We can circle back on
I
that
know we've
later.
got a couple of hats, but at this point, that's all I can think.
Okay.
We might have more in the future.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited. Yay. And I think that will be like a new spin on the tour too. And I love
Super fun to have like
the collaboration.
Yes, to have LPO rep partnering with the city, I think would just be fantastic. So I'm
So
all
good.
for it. Yeah.
Yay.
You know, I love that, right? The collaboration. I feel like every time I talk, that's what I'm saying, right? But like, what a great idea, you know, to bring 2 organizations together and really bring up the energy of a walking tour and stuff. But where my mind went was the historic, I forget what the actual name of it was, but what you did at McDuff's.
Oh,
Where
yes.
we walked through that and everything.
Oh yeah, the private tour. So
Yeah.
I did I did the leadership tour this last year. I did the whole history series with my other teammates in leadership. I know, it was so much fun. So Nikki shared the whole building, and then we went up the catwalk, and I could probably get Nikki to do that too.
Well, and the one I was talking about was maybe a few months earlier, where I think did it cost? And
Oh yeah, the museum did the drinking history there.
that's
was
what it was.
fabulous.
Yeah, you got stuff with it, and
Yes.
drinks or whatever.
Yeah, and Hannah, you should talk to any upcoming events that you have going on too, and make
Yeah.
sure to, not to put you on the spot, but yeah.
The museum is planning a series of drinking history tours, potentially a special topic walking tour.
Cool.
So we will be releasing that information.
Yeah, and we want to be able to share that with everybody too and promote that, and anything we can do to support. I love it.
But even like bringing in, private businesses that, this is McDuff's is private,
Yeah.
but collaborating with them and making it an event. And,
Yeah.
you know,
219 too.
right. There's so many great buildings, and then the businesses inside,
Definitely.
are so proud of their buildings.
Can we go in your basement then? Is that what you're saying?
We definitely could go in there.
So yeah, and the whole thing is with the city is that we want to make sure our events align with other community events that are going on. And the thing about the city in terms of the history of parks and recreation is we're the entry to, right? So let's talk about art. So we're the entry to watercolor. And then when they get interested, we drive them to POAC's watercolor art classes. And so I think that's a big thing. It's like we're the tickler to history, and then we can drive them even furthermore to the museum or any other vehicle for history. So any other questions? Okay, we'll be talking. I'm so excited.
Very good, very good. All right, well, then let's head on to our around the room, 7A. Does anyone in the commission or staff have any general announcement? I want to take the microphone for a second. Really just a short briefing, because we happen to have made this for our last event. And
So beautiful.
I'm going to, show you just a little bit of a concept of federal placemaking. You may know that the school purchased a building in 2019 with a vision to restore its kind of historic value, and also to give it high access to community just because of what's happening in there. So we are on the go. We have replaced the historic fire doors. We're working with Shippo also, and with Heather. You see little Carnegie that is behind the fire doors, our performing center. And then you kind of see what the building was, and what are we going to do with this beast, right? How do we take the past at this moment into the future? And that's one of the questions that we really always need to ask to make sure we can actually live in those buildings. They can be beautiful outside and historic, but we also have to address some of those needs. And for me, one of the very big needs is, well, you have to be able to afford to live in there. So you have to address its energy needs. And one of the reasons is that we see buildings go up in flames or being abandoned is for a very simple reason: people can't live in them. And they don't meet modern standards unless you truly understand what that means and how can you apply modern technology to create a building that is part of the past but can exist in the future for another 100+ years or until Yellowstone explodes. So there's a lot more information on this building. As you may know, we found a historic bell. We are looking to, within the next 5 years, put the bell back up. Right now it lives by the museum.
Another
That was a
collaboration moment.
Yes.
I love it.
And in Little Carnegie, we have hydronic floors, which is huge because that secures that we can actually use a space, and it's not costing a fortune to actually have performances and events in there.
So our next big job is that we are needing to replace our windows. So we're needing to fundraise to replace the windows, again, to address keeping our costs down and making it energy efficient or green. I at some point want to address how we can possibly put solar panels up and really make this building completely green. So I'll be working with people on this one, and then obviously we are show and tell. And to see, well, if you take a historic building and you understand it, not just in the context of when it was built, you have to understand it in its context in 20 or 30 years from now. And that's a really important part, and that's actually a very big part of the conversation, is to make it habitable and to keep it habitable. Otherwise, we see buildings go up in flames for all kinds of different reasons. One reason is that somebody buys it, which by the way is happening in Coeur d'Alene right now. It's you blink and a historic building is gone. And part of that is it's so expensive to address those needs that ever so often there's a tendency to say, let's just get rid of it. So we have to address that desire to let's just get rid of it and put something up there that's, you know, low maintenance and, you know, we don't have to worry about it. So it would be really a good question to ask the community, why would you not be interested in historic preservation? That's a question almost more important of why are you interested? Because we want to hear what they have to say. If we find anybody who will say, I'm not interested because we can anticipate of the expenses or, you know, all of these reasons, and we need to have good answers for those reasons. Because I can tell you, if you were to ask me, I could give you reasons, because it takes a horrendous effort. Now, if a developer comes in and they have millions and millions of dollars to just pour it, you know, and then turn it into a business, that's fine, you know, but you may not always want it to be just a business per se. You may want to kind of go and be creative with it. Creative placemaking is, in a way, creative to create a high level of public access and participation. But that also means you have to raise funds in a very different way than just pour it in as a developer. So many different challenges to preserve the identity, the historic identity of Sandpoint. Very clearly, you don't just want to have one building here, one building there. You want to have a cohesive sense of community, historic community. And it's good to understand what that means and the effort it takes. So come by and see us because there are many details that we're working on as we are uncovering its history. Interestingly enough, we recently had somebody in the building at midnight with all sorts of unique equipment to find ghosts.
Oh,
And I asked, did you find one? No, they need to come back. So be sure you let me know. I'd like to be there.
was it Aqua Fleming?
No, I don't.
Ghostbuster?
No, it was actually Tony.
Because we do have a ghost busting machine, like a vehicle here. in
If it was
town, too.
rented out, we don't even know why. Right. So
I see an event happening right now.
so yeah, it's for sure. And anyway, I thought that was really funny, and yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised. And at some point in my next life, I will be the ghost ringing the bell at odd times. So
I love
promise you
that you have this like intimate love affair with the building too, Karin, and how you talk to the building.
Oh yeah, you heard my little speech there. Yes, and you have to.
Yeah.
You have to have endurance to see a project through. You know, the way you have to have a relationship with your project in that sense, because it takes. You have to roll it uphill for a very long time. And that's just something to be aware of. And, you know, since we are in action here, I can share a lot of the uphill stories. So, but anyway, it's all worth it. It's a significant building in the downtown area. And when we're all done, we as a community own it, right? Because we are show and tell, and we are inspiring other communities to follow suit in Coeur d'Alene. And somewhat offspring preserved historic Hamilton building. that was to be torn down because there were people who didn't see any value in it. How do you speak to value, right? Because they don't always have practical value, they have aesthetic values. So they created a conservatory in Coeur d'Alene. We talked to the mayor and he personally invested. They preserved the Hamilton building and it's now a highlight of that community. It's gorgeous. But it took a vision to get them there because there were incentives to just remove it without anybody knowing, just behind everybody's back. That's the threat, right? So we have to collectively install value into your history, into these buildings, so that your neighbor protects what's happening next to them. And when they see, you know, something being destroyed, to say, wait a moment, I value this. And so, yeah, so anyway, we're part of keeping the conversation going. And this is one of the show and tell stories that hopefully you'll all be part of and come in and see it. And hopefully at some point we can put solar panels up.
Wonderful. Karen, I've loved, Karen has participated on the walks too, where she'll open up the conservatory and share. And I love that. It sounds like you're open to continuing to do that. And
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited about what you all are doing and so appreciative. And when Dan Everhart laughed at me and was like, well, I don't know how you're going to have a merged arts, culture, and historic preservation commission. And I was like, you just watch, because we're going to blow your mind and everyone will start doing it. And he said, well, I hope not. This is the director of SHPO. Karen, you're an example of how successful arts, culture, and historic preservation can work together. So thank you. And we look forward to all of your expertise and your knowledge too as we move forward.
And creative placemaking, yes. Thank you.
I would love to invite all of you to the opening of an exhibit I've been working on. It's going to be this Friday at Evans Brothers from 5 to 7:30. It is an exploration of development and historic preservation through the history of the old Elsasser homestead that was torn down on North Boyer in 2021. So we did a really deep dive into the history of the property, all the people who lived there, and then kind of just exploring, you know, why was it torn down? How does development work? If someone wanted to pursue historic preservation, where might they get, where like the break points where they might be turned off from that idea? How can we encourage that in the future? So I'm really excited that it's done. It's been a long journey. And I would love each of you to be there. I know this is barely scraping the surface of the bigger conversation, but I'm hoping that it will be an entry point to the community in terms of supporting what we do here and our goals. 5 to 7:30.
Thank you so much.
You're doing a presentation or is it just an open house?
We'll probably do a short presentation, but it's pretty text and data heavy. So we're going to be a lot to read.
Oh, how terrific. Congratulations.
All right, anyone else? With
Good. Something, I think everybody's aware of it, but if not, something that's kind of important to the fabric of this community is this proposed couplet, part of the highway thing that you guys have probably been reading. Anyway, there's a workshop, I think, in this room tomorrow night. And then Ben Olson's hosting a public forum on it on Monday night at the library. And, you know, obviously traffic can be a problem at certain times and stuff in the community and stuff, but I think that we need to be, as a community, smart about how we do it so that we don't end up with bifurcated neighborhoods and stuff and things that I think go against what we're trying to do here as a group here in terms of how we're keeping some of these local residential neighborhoods and stuff as part of the town and the community. So with that said, I just thought I'd let you know there's at least a workshop here that involves the town council and Ben Olson's community forum on Monday night.
Thank you so much, Woody.
Yeah. Well, thanks for a great meeting. This has been very, very informative and I appreciate everyone's time. All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you.